The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Don McIntosh. We're glad that you've joined us today. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that many are talking about, carbohydrates. Are they good for you? Are they bad for you? What about carbohydrate diets or low-carb diets or high-carb diets? Maybe you've heard about this. And talking with us today about this important subject is Dr. Tim Arnott. He's a physician at the Lifestyle Center of America in Oklahoma, which focuses on teaching people about these very things and helping them reverse lifestyle problems or diseases that are related to lifestyle by looking at what they eat or what they don't eat or what they do or don't do. We're glad you're with us, Dr. Arnott.
Thank you.
You've been a physician for, what was it, about 14 years?
About 14 years.
And in family practice?
Family practice.
Preventive
lifestyle medicine. That's something that I've been doing for, well, about 5 years.
So day in, day out there at the Lifestyle Center of America in Oklahoma, you're dealing with subjects just like this.
Absolutely. We have people come from all around the country, and their friends, their neighbors, their commentators on the news programs are telling them low carbohydrate diets. That's what you want to get into.
Yeah, it seems to be a big buzz. I'm sure a lot of people are talking about that at your center. What about carbohydrates then? We hear so much about them. Are they our enemies or are they our friends?
Well, it's interesting. We had some data that we recently collected at the Lifestyle Center of America, and it was presented at the most recent meeting of the American Dietetic Association. Basically what we did was take a number of our patients, about 20 patients, we took them as they came through the program, and we measured what happened to these patients when they were on our program, which is a high complex carbohydrate diet, about 60-65% carbohydrates, about 20% fat, and 15-20% protein. And what was shocking to the individuals there at that conference was that they actually saw blood sugar levels drop on a high carbohydrate diet. And they measured this in the form of a fructosamine, which is a test that measures your blood sugar level over the last 2 weeks. And it actually dropped significantly. And all of the numbers were highly statistically significant. Not only did the fructosamine drop, but we saw cholesterol come down. Those who were on a statin medication like Lipitor or
stuff that makes all your cholesterol go
yes,
down.
Exactly. They came in with average total cholesterol levels on a medicine now in the 150s. And, most people would think, well, that's just right where you need to be, and you probably don't need to get any better. But on our program, the average total cholesterol dropped from the 150s down into the 120s for the average total cholesterol on a high carbohydrate diet. And,
I can just hear people gasping. A high-carb diet?
Exactly.
I mean, everything around is saying low carbs.
Well, after this meeting, people were coming up and talking with our dietitian who gave the lecture and our former medical director, Dr. Zeno Charles Marcel, and they were so astounded that somewhere in America they were treating diabetes with a high carbohydrate diet and they were getting success. So it's actually exciting to work there. It's actually exciting to see these changes.
Well, there's got to be something then about carbs that I don't know about or most people don't know about. Why are they saying some are bad? Are there some that are bad and some that are good?
Well, there are differences. And that's probably one of the most important messages we want to get across is that not all foods are created equal. Most people know that. But not all carbohydrates are created equal. And recently we've heard a lot about how not all fats are created equal. Before it was low fat and now it's good fat. Well, the same can be said for carbohydrates. And right now we're in a low carbohydrate. That's what's good. Actually, what you want is good carbohydrate. We're going to get to that discussion in a minute. But first of all, we'd like to back up and just state that there is actually a foundation for a high carbohydrate diet. And
is this looking back to the original diet? Is that what you're suggesting?
well, that's exactly right.
Going all the way back?
That's exactly.
And I think you have a graphic on this.
That's right. We have a graphic, and I was, doing some research into the makeup of what the Creator gave us as an original diet. And I have a food processing software. Escher Research puts it out there in Salem, Oregon. And basically what I did was to take about 200 of the commonly eaten plant foods in the fruit, vegetable, grain, and bean category and just see what was in them. So this is essentially most all of the plant foods with exception of the nuts and seeds that we would be accustomed to eating. And as you can see, the carbohydrate content, the average carbohydrate content of those nearly 200 foods is not 40%, which is what's often
78%?
78%, almost double what's currently recommended by some diet enthusiasts.
So your point is that if you look at the original diet of the Bible, that being Genesis 1:29, you're finding a high carb diet.
Exactly. I mean, if you want to find out what the Creator designed for His creatures, you want to go to the owner's manual and check it out. And it's actually very interesting that the protein content of the Creator's foods never changes from 15%. It's 15%, and most of the foods are basically very similar except for the nuts and seeds. And we can go to that graphic now. And you'll see that when you add the nuts and seeds to those other plant foods,
fat goes up a bit, it looks like.
The fat certainly goes up. It goes up from around 7% to about 25%. Now, this is putting the nuts and seeds as equal with the other food categories, which is not what's recommended. But if you were to do that, that would give you the lowest carbohydrate content of the Creator's diet possible. And as you can see, it's still at 60%.
60%, and the fat goes up to 25.
And as you can see, the protein doesn't change one iota. It's right there at 14, 15%. So in a sense, the Creator's diet is never high protein.
Okay, never high protein.
And always high carb.
And it could be a little bit higher fat or lower fat depending on how many nuts you eat.
Exactly.
And if you eat them as they were grown, it takes you a while to get through those shells, so it's not going to be too high.
Exactly. In fact, if you were to eat the nuts and seeds as you recommended, the Creator put them in hard shells, kind of a clue there not to use them more sparingly, then you'll be at a carbohydrate content of about 65, 70%, fat right around 15%. And that's the diet that's been shown to give us the greatest benefit against all of the chronic diseases we're dealing with in this country.
So the amazing thing to me is many times I'll hear, actually I've even heard some Christian physicians and whatnot saying, no, this low carb is the way to go. But they're going against the actual ultimate source in their trade, that being the Bible, when they say that in a sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's the old saying, if all else fails, go back to Genesis and look at the owner's manual. And I was excited to see this, that the Creator's original diet endorses a lot of the research that's coming out. Now, there's a few studies coming out that would suggest that perhaps a low carbohydrate diet that's high in protein can actually help you lose weight. But what individuals need to know is that diets that will help you lose weight, when you look at the final analysis, those diets are lower in calories. That's why people lose weight.
Well, why do you think the Creator loaded His food with carbohydrates? 60% if you add the nuts, and 75% if you're just looking at without the nuts. Why did He load it up with that?
Well, there's a lot of good reasons for that. In fact, we can go to the next graphic to get us started. But the Creator actually loaded His food with carbohydrates, first of all, because carbohydrates have actually been shown to raise the serotonin levels. And one of the ways that...
And what's serotonin?
Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical that the nerves in the brain use to communicate with each other.
Does it make you feel good or bad?
Well, it actually helps to improve your mood. In fact, one of the most common reasons that people see a physician today is for the diagnosis of depression. And the most common treatment for that condition is what we call SSRIs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which essentially, one nerve will actually put serotonin out in the synapse between the nerves to stimulate the next nerve in line, and that nerve that put out the serotonin will then retake that up out of the space there. And this drug gets in there and blocks that reuptake, and so there's more serotonin in that space between the nerves, and this helps to boost
the carbs do that naturally.
Well, actually, what some people may not understand is that there are some important amino acids that are in the food, and one of these is tryptophan. And tryptophan is the raw material that the body uses to make serotonin.
Okay, so it's a little different mechanism, but the bottom line is it increases those levels and it increases well-being.
Absolutely. You see, the plant kingdom, being relatively moderate in protein, doesn't overload the body's system with some of these competing amino acids. You know, tryptophan has some competitors, and if you eat a high-protein diet, you get more of these competing amino acids, and so you get lower blood levels of tryptophan, and you get less serotonin made in the brain.
And you don't feel as good about yourself, and
that's
basically.
Exactly right.
What's another reason to have a diet high in carbs?
Well, some of the other reasons, and we can again go to our graphics, but some of the other reasons is that right alongside the carbohydrates are some of the protective nutrients. And we'll get more to that in a minute. In fact, I want to show a document that I have here. But there's also important receptors that are on each of the cells in our bodies.
Glucoproteins and glycolipids?
Glycolipids and glycoproteins.
Okay, and what do they do?
Well, actually, for example, most people are familiar with their blood type. You know, A positive or A negative. Actually, these letters in your blood type refer to the carbohydrates, the specialized sugars that are actually hanging off of proteins on your red blood cell membranes. And so all of the cells in the body have receptors. They have proteins on the surface, and also have fats, of course, in the membrane. And off of these proteins and off of these fats are different specialized sugars. And these sugars are what help the body to communicate with itself. In fact, the immune system can recognize a cell in the body based on that sugar, that carbohydrate that is sticking out there in space off of the cell membrane. And so carbohydrates are very important for communication in the body and these very sophisticated immune system
So if you have
mechanisms.
a low-carb diet, you maybe wouldn't be able, your body wouldn't be maybe as apt at communicating.
Well, that's exactly right.
So you want to be able to, it's like having more than 2 or 3 telephone lines.
You know, if you don't have the raw material to make these communications and to send those messages over those lines, the communication is going to break down.
What's another reason for?
Well, some of the other reasons are probably my most popular reason are for the fact that people are able to actually endure and actually have a stronger sense of strength. In fact, one of the most
physical endurance.
Physical endurance. One of the things that's been found as a side effect of these low carbohydrate diets is that people have fatigue. In fact, that was the #2 complaint of individuals that get on these kind of diets. The most common complaint was constipation because fiber and carbohydrates are stuck right there together. So physical endurance is important. In fact, you know, there were studies done a number of years ago, several decades ago, by Dr. Ostrand, who actually put these athletes on a bicycle, and they actually pedaled those bicycles until they were no longer able to continue, until they were totally exhausted. And they gave these athletes 3 different diets in succession with washout periods in between. And what they found is that when they put these individuals on a high protein, low carbohydrate diet, they were able to go about an hour on the bicycle before they
That's not very long.
Not very long, before they were totally exhausted. These are fit, well-trained athletes.
I see.
Now, then they put them on a mixed diet, which we might call a meat and potatoes diet, which has sort of moderate amount of protein, moderate amount of carbohydrate. And then they went about 2 hours on these bicycles before they were totally exhausted. And then they put these same trained athletes on a high carbohydrate, low protein diet.
Creator's diet type.
Creator's diet, plant-based diet, and they went for almost 3 hours.
3 hours.
Now there are researchers in Finland who have been experimenting with this, and in one of their reviews, they have noted that you don't actually need meat for endurance in physical athletes. You know, endurance athletes don't need meat. In fact, they've discovered that individuals are able to go at sprints anywhere from 2 to 7 minutes longer. They call these anaerobic sprints because basically they're moving their muscles so rapidly that they have to use more than just oxygen burning in the cell to get the job done. And on a high carbohydrate diet, they're able to go several minutes longer.
We've been talking with Dr. Tim Arnott. He's a physician at the Lifestyle Center of America in Oklahoma. And we're learning some fascinating things about these low-carb diets. We found that the Creator's prescription is actually better. When we come back, we're going to look at some more about low-carb and high-carb diets. I know you won't want to miss it. Join us when we come back.
Have you found yourself wishing that you could shed a few pounds? Have you been on a diet for most of your life, but not found anything that will really keep the weight off? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then we have a solution for you that works. Dr. Hans Deal and Dr. Eileen Ludington have written a marvelous booklet called Reversing Obesity Naturally, and we'd like to send it to you free of charge. Here's a medically sound approach successfully used by thousands who are able to eat more and lose weight permanently without feeling guilty or hungry through lifestyle medicine. Dr. Deal and Dr. Ludington have been featured on 3ABN, and in this booklet, they present a sensible approach to eating, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that can help you prevent heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. Call or write today for your free copy of Reversing Obesity Naturally, and you could be on your way to a healthier, happier you. It's absolutely free of charge, so call or write today.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. Tim Arnott. He's a physician at the Lifestyle Center in Oklahoma, and every day you're helping people kind of sort out these things about low-carb diets or high-carb diets, what's healthy for them and whatnot. Let's summarize a little bit what we've learned. Even though there's a lot of wisdom out there supposedly saying that we need to look at low-carb diets, there's really good reasons to look at complex carbohydrates in the diet.
Absolutely. What we basically have learned that not all carbohydrates are created
bad.
equal.
Okay, yeah.
There are good carbohydrates and there are bad carbohydrates.
And the good ones are the complex ones, foods as grown.
Exactly. In fact, what's driving this whole, or one of the things that's driving this whole discussion and this whole interest in low-carb diets is the fact that most of the carbohydrates that have been available in this country have been the bad kind, the white flour, the refined pasta, the white potatoes, and these are the kind of foods that are frankly are just not helping a society that's largely overweight.
What's the most important reason to choose a carbohydrate-rich food, a good carbohydrate-rich food?
I think, frankly, one of the most important reasons is reflected in this document here, the U.S. Department of Agriculture database for the flavonoid content of selected foods. Now, flavonoids are one of the protective chemicals that the plants actually use and generate when they're trying to protect themselves. I mean, it's a harsh world out there, and apples, pears, and different fruits and vegetables generate these protective nutrients.
Flavonoid, it sounds almost like a flavor to me, but you're saying it's a protective thing.
It's a protective chemical that the plant makes in order to protect itself from its environment. When you eat those flavonoids, those chemicals actually protect your cells from injury and damage.
So an apple a day keeps the invaders away?
Absolutely.
Truly.
In fact, we're told that apples are probably one of the most beneficial fruits out there.
Macintosh apples, perhaps?
Absolutely.
All right, good.
Now, this is 60 pages right here.
60
pages from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It just goes through in regular small print all of the different flavonoids that have been discovered in plants. I emphasize plants. They're only found in plants, and you're only going to find them in foods that contain carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are packaged by the Creator next to protective foods. And if you don't get the carbohydrates, you're going to miss what's packaged with the carbohydrates.
Not only will you not have a sense of well-being because there's not enough serotonin, not only will you not have the communication you need, not only will you not have the endurance, but then you're a sitting duck. You're not going to be able to be protected.
Absolutely. And there's other nutrients, not just flavonoids. There are antioxidants, the vitamin C, vitamin E, the carotenes, beta, gamma, all these different nutrients that provide color for the plant. Now, those pigments that provide the red of the tomato, the yellow-orange of the sweet potato, when they get inside the body, in the plant, they were used to absorb the ionizing radiation that's from the ultraviolet light, protecting that tomato from a sunburn when it sits out there in the sun for 8 hours in Oklahoma. When you eat that lycopene, when you eat that pigment, that colored chemical, it actually protects your body from the damaging effects of what we call free radicals, which are these highly reactive, highly unstable oxygen chemicals.
I know a couple of those people, free radicals, but it's really food. Okay, I think you've convinced everybody to really take another look at this if they were leaning towards the low-carb or maybe even on that low-carb thing. But what problems are really created by low-carb, high-protein diets? I think you have a graphic on this.
Yes, we do. And one of the major concerns of researchers that are looking at these high-protein diets, these low-carbohydrate diets, are the fact that, these...
Leach minerals from bones, it says?
One of the major groups that are looking to lose weight in this country are those that have insulin resistance and diabetes.
I see.
Well, if you have insulin resistance and diabetes, your kidneys are at risk. Your kidneys are already injured to a certain extent, and certainly when you get into diabetes, you have early kidney injury, and I mean, your kidneys can actually fail, and that's one of the major causes of kidney failure. Well, to put those individuals with insulin resistance, diabetes, and kidneys at risk on a high-protein diet is just asking for trouble, because the kidney is the major burden bearer of all this excess protein, because protein cannot be stored. It simply has to be broken down, turned into waste, and it goes out through the kidneys.
So if somebody has diabetes or someone in their family did or different things, especially avoid these high-protein, low-carb diets. But on the graphic we looked at, it talked about leaching things from the bones?
That's correct. In fact,
what's that
what actually happens when you have too much protein, when you have, say, 2 or 3 times the recommended daily allowance of protein, this actually increases the acid level of the blood. In fact, these proteins are converted into ammonia. They're converted into sulfates from the sulfur-containing amino acids. And as soon as these acids are released into the bloodstream, they stimulate a cell that lives in your bones called the osteoclast, which is sort of its job is just like it sounds. It's kind of a removal of bone matrix inside of your bones, because there are buffers in your bones, the citrate and the carbonate.
So the protein does this and it stimulates that, and then what happens? It starts to suck things out of the bones?
The cell actually is activated inside your bone to get out the buffers that are going to get rid of that acid. And these buffers, again, are citrate and carbonate.
So this can cause osteoporosis if you're on these.
Right. As those buffers are being released from the bones, the calcium goes out with it. And so calcium levels go up in the urine. You're at higher risk for kidney stones.
Whoa.
And just an increased burden on the kidney.
We have some other problems we'll look at. Let's look at them quickly because we only have about 4 minutes, and I want to get to also some good news at the end here. What are some of the other problems? We've got high cholesterol levels. How does that work, real briefly? How does that work? Why does that
actually, a very interesting study was done by Dr. O'Day and her colleagues at the University of Melbourne in Australia. And what Dr. O'Day found is she actually studied individuals with diabetes. She put them on 4 different diets. And in short, one of these diets was high carbohydrate, high fiber. In other words, a plant diet, foods eaten as grown, as you mentioned earlier. And one of the other diets was a high protein and low fat diet, low carbohydrate diet. And they actually found that both of those diets lowered cholesterol. And but they discovered something very interesting, and that was that the high carbohydrate, high fiber diet lowered cholesterol twice as good, twice as well as the low carbohydrate, high protein diet.
So when the Atkins diet or something like that says cholesterol is going to go down, it will, but you can double that if you are on a complex carbohydrate diet instead of a low-carb diet.
Exactly. And one thing that people should know, any diet that restricts your calories
is going to lower
cholesterol.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. It's not a big thing that a diet will lower cholesterol.
Okay, another problem, let's look at another one here on our graphic that you wanted to mention, high urine calcium. I guess you've already talked about that.
Yes, as soon as the body tries to get at those buffers in the bone to get rid of that acid, you're going to be losing calcium, and it'll go out through the urine at greater risk of kidney stones.
Well, doctor, you've talked about why we should avoid those low-carb diets and move to the complex carbohydrates. As we close up, let's look at some of these reasons why medical researchers have found low-carb diets safe and effective. Why is that?
Well, actually, Dr. Bravata and her colleagues at Stanford University have actually found that these diets that a lot of people are adopting have not been studied very thoroughly. And in fact, one of the diets that's lowest in carbohydrates has only been studied in 71 people since 1966.
So the low, for these high-protein diets, they really don't have the research to back up.
Exactly.
We have about a minute and a half left. What are some other reasons that we should look at carbohydrate diets?
Well, I would just like to refer to a study by Dr. Richard Fleming in Omaha, who actually put two groups of individuals on two different diets. One was a high carbohydrate diet, around 70% carbohydrate, and another group went on a high protein diet. And he actually does nuclear medicine studies to see how much blood is getting to the heart muscle. And what he discovered was if you went on a high carbohydrate diet that was low in fat, he had about 40% increase in blood flow to the heart muscle of those patients with coronary disease. But those who went on the high protein diet as a choice and preferred that, they actually had worsening of the blood flow to the heart muscle, and so there actually was progression of their coronary disease. #1 problem in this country. And so if you've got a diet that's, even if it's lowering your cholesterol, but if it's worsening the artery situation, that's really a liability.
We've been talking with Dr. Tim Arnott. He's a physician at the Lifestyle Center of America in Oklahoma. We've been talking about high versus low-carb diets. We've seen here on this program that carbohydrates are not all bad. The Creator's diet is actually very high in complex carbohydrates. And, why is it that people are many times interested in these other diets? They want good news about maybe their bad habits. If that's been your case, take a second look. We hope that as a result, you'll have health for a lifetime.